What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Left-Handed Leftist. As always, I'm your host here, Carlos. It is so amazing, and I'm so happy to have you all here with me this week. You all, we have a really exciting show for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about the government shutdown. We're going to be talking about the food stamps that have been cut off. We're going to be talking about federal workers and Trump trying to not give all federal workers back pay, even though there's some legal language that ensures that they should. And we're also going to be talking about why we even have government shutdowns and this debt ceiling as a policy here within the United States. And with that, let's get into our first article here. So you all, our first article is from The Hill. It is titled "New SNAP Restrictions Go Into Place Amid Shutdown Drama." And this is by Ryan Mancini. The article starts by saying, new supplemental nutrition assistance program rules are going into effect on Saturday, even as benefits will already not be issued through November without federal funding because of the government shutdown. The United States Department of Agriculture's USDA website, where millions of Americans can review their options and apply, details how, quote, the well has run dry to issue program benefits. Atop the page, the USDA blames Senate Democrats for benefits not being issued starting Saturday. Quote, Senate Democrats have now voted 13 times to not fund the food stamps program, also known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the page reads. At this time, there will be no benefits issued November 1. We are approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. They can continue to hold out for health care for illegal aliens and gender mutilation procedures, or reopen the government so mothers, babies, and the most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutrition assistance. While SNAP benefits will not be issued until funding continues, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act also enacts new restrictions that took effect starting Saturday. These changes are expected to push some people out of the program after an estimated $186 billion federal spending cut over the next decade. Adults without dependents could see the biggest change in the need to prove they work at least 80 hours a month, are pursuing an education, or are in a training program to remain qualified for SNAP. Should they not have proof, they will receive SNAP benefits for a total of 3 months maximum. Additionally, any adults younger than 65 years old must prove they are working to continue receiving benefits. Parents with dependents younger than 14 are now exempt from the work requirements, whereas before it applied to parents with dependents younger than 18 years old. Young adults and homeless people now must meet work requirements to receive over 3 months of benefits. Another change will impact, quote, non-citizen eligibility for SNAPs for immigrants, including non-citizen U.S. nationals, lawful permanent residents, Cuban and Haitian entrants, and those without legal status. State agencies will have to review, quote, household circumstances to take appropriate action during an immigrant certification process for benefits before notifying that person they are no longer eligible for SNAP, according to the USDA's website. Refugees granted asylum and human trafficking survivors, meanwhile, will lose their benefits, according to a memo from Oregon's Department of Human Services. So let's take a pause right there real quick. I want to kind of set the stage for what is SNAP. And it kind of said here that SNAP is a supplemental nutrition program, basically, so people who are below a certain threshold get money from the federal government, but also through a state government and sometimes local government as well. They get food assistance so that they're able to feed themselves and their family, basically. There are over actually 40 million Americans who use SNAP. This ranges from people who are unhoused, veterans, seniors, even people who are working, because as we know here in the United States, there are a lot of jobs like Amazon, Walmart, which do not pay a living wage. So you have people who are working full time and do not make enough to be able to purchase food and also the other necessities of life. What you have here is, because the government is going through a shutdown, SNAP technically does not have the funding to give out money or to give out the benefit. So you're talking about within the wealthiest country in the world, we are having an issue that people cannot get the necessary food that they need to live. And I also want to state this, that SNAP, even before this happened and people were getting their SNAP benefits, SNAP was not making sure that everyone is fed. We have seen year after year there be cuts to SNAP and how much families get, how much individuals get, either with children or without children, and people are still having to skip meals even when you have people who use the benefit. But then on top of that, you really don't have a lot of people talking about how the Trump tax bill that just passed is going to cut a whole lot of people off of these SNAP benefits that they need to be able to sustain themselves and their families. And you're not just talking about people, because they always love to say that, oh, the people who are using these government programs are you're lazy, you're people who don't want to work. That's not who you have. You have veterans who are coming back with disabilities that make it so they cannot work. Or because they are living off of their income when it comes to being a veteran, that they do not make enough to be able to afford food. You have elderly people who, because they may only be on Social Security, they don't have the funds to be able to feed themselves or their families. So it is sad that, again, within the wealthiest country in the world, you have residents here who are not able to feed their families, and you don't have Democrat lawmakers while they are in this negotiation for the government shutdown who are saying that we also need to raise the eligibility to allow the same people who were previously able to get SNAP benefits to continue to get these benefits and take off some of these work requirements, because you have a lot of disabled people, unhoused people who are not able to meet these requirements. And one thing to also say how this serves in corporations' favor, when people are living on the edges of society and in between either not being able to feed themselves and their families or being on the very edge of like having government assistance, when you do not have these government assistance programs and these social safety nets that I want to stress, the majority of countries in the world do have like the basic necessities of a social safety net. But when you have a situation where people do not have those things, then corporations are able to lower wages because they know you don't have any other option. You will take a job that barely pays you. It doesn't pay you enough to be able to afford rent, afford a mortgage, afford food, afford a car, afford the basic necessities of life. So they will keep you right on the edge, just enough to quote unquote sustain yourself, but make it so that you aren't able to thrive or aren't able to demand better, because now you're scared that if you don't have this job that doesn't pay you enough, that you will be without, because we don't even have the government assistance to support people during the most challenging and in the hardest time of their life. And then also I want to talk about just real quick how this affects undocumented families and also children of undocumented people. When you have a situation where people's parents are unable to get government assistance just because their parent so happens to be undocumented, that means that a lot of times their children are not receiving these benefits as well. And I know currently it is legal for a child of undocumented parents to be able to apply for benefits such as SNAP themselves. But because you have a ramping up of immigration enforcement when it comes to non-violent and also people with no criminal records, you have a lot of families and a lot of children who are going to feel uncomfortable and scared to actually apply for these government assistance, for the fact of someone finding out that they have an undocumented parent or there are undocumented people living in their household. This means that you're going to have people and children who have to make the difficult decision to go without food, or do I risk the safety of my parents or family members by applying for SNAP benefits so that we can eat? It's very challenging. And the article continues by saying what remains an issue is whether the USDA will use its contingency funding to allow SNAP benefits to be paid through November. On Friday, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from cutting off SNAP benefits. U.S. District Judge John McConnell rejected the argument that emergency funding can only be used for those impacted by natural disasters. Quote, SNAP benefits have never until now been terminated, McConnell said at a hearing. Quote, the United States has, in fact, admitted that the contingency funds are appropriately used during a shutdown, and that occurred in 2019. There is around $5.25 billion reserved to cover the program in November, but it does not cover the full $9.2 billion that the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, said the federal government would have to spend for the program. On Friday, Rollins told reporters that Democrats were wrong in suggesting that the contingency fund could be used. Quote, if today, say for example, Democrats say, oh, never mind, sorry, we'll reopen the government, and SNAP flows, Hurricane Melissa or one of the hurricanes hits, that's the contingency fund that we would use to send more money into vulnerable communities that are harmed by a specific event like a hurricane, Rollins said. Quote, but it is a contingency fund that can only flow if the underlying appropriation is approved, she continued. Quote, and listen, even if it could flow, it doesn't even cover half of the month of November. So here we are again in 2 weeks having the exact same conversation. Later on Friday, President Trump indicated that he would fund SNAP, but noted that benefits would be delayed for the month of November. Quote, our government lawyers do not think we have the legal authority to pay SNAP with certain monies that we have available. And now two courts have issued conflicting opinions on what we can and cannot do, Trump posted on Truth Social. Quote, I do not want Americans to go hungry because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. Quote, therefore, I have instructed our lawmakers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. So you all, I want to point out the hypocrisy in this. One, you have the Secretary of Agriculture basically saying this money is not used for government shutdowns. This money can only be used when it comes to natural disasters. And then from Trump's side, he's saying that we don't know, or from what we understand, the money cannot be used for this. It can only be used under these specific circumstances. However, we're going to make sure that people get the funding. And then if Democrats would just do the right thing, then this would all be over. And I want to talk about the hypocrisy of each of those. One, you have the hypocrisy of saying that there's no legality to them using the money. We already see that the money can be used. The U.S. district judge already has said that the contingency money was used to cover SNAP benefits in 2019. So it's nothing for them to do that again. The other point is that you have this whole thing of only in natural disasters can we use the money. Trump has been notorious for not approving natural disaster relief funding. There was a natural disaster in Western Maryland when it came to disastrous floods that Trump denied federal funding to help families out. There was also a natural disaster in Arkansas when they had tornadoes, which Trump also denied funding for earlier this year. You also have in West Virginia, Trump also denied federal funds when it comes to flooding. So Trump has a history of putting natural disasters back on states and saying, you handle it. So it's insane for me to believe that if this were a natural disaster, that Trump would use this contingency funding. And also, it's called contingency funding for a reason. It's meant for times like this. Now, there's another conversation that should be had is why is there so little contingency funding, especially if you have the Secretary of Agriculture saying how the funds that are in there now wouldn't even cover the entire month. And at the same time, you have corporations investing millions, even billions of dollars into this new Trump ballroom that they're having. If all those corporations could have, instead of funding this ballroom so that Trump and other presidents can have parties, but instead gave money into SNAP by being taxed appropriately, then maybe we would actually be in a better situation as far as a country, rather than living in the wealthiest country in the world and having people who do not have the money to buy food. So with that, let's go to our next article and talk about how federal workers are also bearing the brunt of this government shutdown. So this article is by NPR. It is titled "White House Floats No Back Pay for Some Furloughed Federal Workers Despite 2019 Law." And this is by Stephen Fowler and Claudia Grisales. The article reads, President Trump is floating the possibility that some of the roughly 600,000 furloughed federal workers could be denied back pay once the government reopens, despite a 2019 law intended to ensure federal employees are compensated after a shutdown. Speaking in the Oval Office on Tuesday, Trump appeared to publicly back a draft White House memo that includes an argument for denying workers pay. Quote, "I would say it depends on who we're talking about," Trump said. "I can tell you this. The Democrats have put a lot of people in great risks and jeopardy, but it really depends on who we're talking about. But for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way." When pressed on the legality of such a move, Trump said, quote, "What the law says is correct, and I follow the law." Trump was responding to questions about a draft memo from the Office of Management and Budget, which was first reported by Axios and confirmed by a senior White House official not authorized to discuss the memo, which has not been publicly circulated. The fight over federal worker pay is the latest salvo in the Trump administration's efforts to force Democrats to vote for a clean continuing resolution and drop their demands to extend healthcare subsidies for millions of Americans. The memo's legal arguments contradict guidance issued by the Office of Personnel Management and the wording of a 2019 law signed by Trump during his first term that explicitly guarantees that federal workers, quote, "shall be paid when a shutdown ends, whether they were furloughed or continued working." The Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019 is a bipartisan law enacted after the record 35-day shutdown in 2018 added language to the Anti-Deficiency Act that automatically applies back pay to federal workers for, quote, "any lapse in appropriations that begin on or after December 22nd, 2018. Previously, Congress had to approve retroactive funding after a shutdown with new legislation. The White House memo notes a clause in the text that says workers shall be paid, quote, "at the earliest date possible after the lapse in appropriation ends, regardless of scheduled pay dates and subject to the enactment of appropriations acts ending the lapse," and argues that this means congressional action is required to enact back pay. Guidance published by the Office of Management and Budget on September 3rd did include reference to the law's automatic restoration pay. Quote, "The Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019, Public Law 116-1, provides that upon enactment of appropriations to end a lapse for both furloughed and exempt employees will be paid retroactively as soon as possible after the lapse ends, regardless of scheduled pay dates." The September 30th memo reads, quote, "Additional guidance for agencies on implementing Public Law 116-1 and treatment of pay and leave is available from OPM. A version updated on October 3rd removes those paragraphs." The draft memo is the latest in a multi-pronged pressure campaign from the White House seeking to punish Democrats during the shutdown, including efforts to cancel grant funding for energy products and hold up transportation funding in states that did not vote for Trump in 2024. The administration has also threatened widespread reduction in force efforts at federal agencies which have so far not materialized. So let's stop there for a second, you all. Federal workers, I just want to say this, have nothing to do with the government shutdown. They do not get a vote on it. They do not cause it. They cannot do anything to prevent it. This is solely on legislators. And to me, it is crazy that you have legislators who continue to get paid throughout a government shutdown. They continue to trade stocks. They continue to make millions of dollars from book sales, speaking arrangements, all that. But you have federal workers doing their jobs and being civil servants unable to pay their bills and be able to just do the necessary things, whether they are stopped from working or they still have to go into work and just not get paid, like our military, like other essential workers. Now, even after Trump himself signed the bill that says that all federal government workers, no matter what they're doing, they will get back pay. You even have Trump now going back on that, saying that he doesn't think that it is a that they legally have to pay everyone. On top of that, we must also talk about the people who get left out in this. You have federal contractors who do not get back pay, and you also have other people who are affected by federal workers not getting paid, especially people in the service industry, restaurant workers, servers. You have people who do things like hair care and beauty care, people who clean people's houses or even have small businesses. They're going to be affected because you have less people who are able to pay their bills, less people who are able to um less people who are go out and eat, go out and tip, get their hair done. So that means that you have a whole downstream of effects on the economy just because the government shuts down, caused by legislators having their own internal problems. So let's keep reading to talk about what Congress's response to this is. So it says Congress response. House Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters that while he isn't extremely familiar with the plan and hasn't discussed it with the White House, it is possible there may be legal justifications for the draft. Quote, there are legal analysts who think it's not something that the government should do. Johnson said, quote, if that is true, that should turn up with urgency and the necessity of the Democrats doing the right thing. The top Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Patty Murray, argued that the interpretation to withhold back pay was, quote, lawless. They're plotting to try to rob furloughed federal workers of back pay at the end of this shutdown, Murray said in remarks on the Senate floor. Quote, this flies in the face of the plain text of the law, which could not be more clear. And before we recap that real quick, I want to go over this government agency furloughs. It says numbers reflect temporary furloughs during the government shutdown as detailed in the agency's shutdown contingency plans. So you have the Environmental Protection Agency that has furloughed around 13,000 workers, Education Department around 1,500, the Labor Department around 11,000 people, Commerce Department around 34,700 people. And even going down to the IRS with 34,400 people, the Defense Department of 334,904 people, and the list goes on and on and on again. And note, Defense Department figures include civilian employees only. You were talking about hundreds of thousands of people's lives being affected here. And it is disgusting that, again, within the wealthiest nation in the world, you literally have lawmakers and the president looking and saying that we don't think that we should give people back pay. And it's even crazy that no one has brought up the fact that why isn't it that the federal contractors also get back pay too so that they can pay their employees. And I can't wait until the next segment to talk about we have to continue to borrow money again in the wealthiest nation in the world. It is crazy in my mind that we have to continue to borrow money when we are the wealthiest nation in the world. We can tax the upper class. We can tax the millionaires and billionaires enough so that we can have a thriving social safety net and not have to have this fight every single year about whether the government stays open or not. So with that, let's go to our next and final clip or our first clip and our final segment here that talks about the government shutdown. And this is by Democracy Now!
Stealing is a decision made by the Congress of the United States to limit themselves. And let me explain. In our federal budget in the government, in order to spend money on the Defense Department, the war in Ukraine, Social Security, and all the rest, the government basically relies on taxes. But therein lies a problem in our economic system, because the corporations and the rich on the one hand and the rest of us on the other want the government to provide services, but we don't want to pay taxes. And the politicians we elect are caught in that dilemma. They don't want to lose votes by taxing the rest of us beyond what they've already done. And they don't want to lose donations and all the rest of it from corporations and the rich by taxing them. And they found a solution because they don't have much political courage, namely to borrow the money. In that way, they can pay for the spending without taxing anybody, and they can parade around as if this is an act of efficiency rather than an act of no courage to do what they know could be done, raise the taxes or cut the spending, and then we wouldn't have to borrow. They've been borrowing so much. Let me give you an example. In 1982, the debt of this country and the GDP, our output, were roughly the same. Today, our output is 21, 22 trillion, but our national debt is 32 trillion. That is, over all these years, when we've had a sequence of debt ceilings, a rule that you can't borrow more, after the theater of the president and the head of Congress getting together, they extend the debt, they raise the debt again, the ceiling is eliminated or postponed or reset at a higher level, and so the debts keep going. It's 99% theatrics. Mr. McCarthy can say, I'm against taxes, which his base likes, and the Democrats can say, well, we don't want to savage the spending the country needs, which is what their base wants. They go back and forth. It gets dicey. We have late night press conferences, and then we raise the ceiling, which is literally kicking the problem down the road.
So, and that was a wonderful clip by Democracy Now! And also Professor Richard Wolff. He kind of lays it out there that we're not having this whole government shutdown, raising the debt ceiling conversation just because this is a normal way to do things. And it really starts from the reason that we're even borrowing the money in the first place is because we are not taxing the wealthy as we should to just pay for these programs outright. And that is one of the reasons why the United States is one of the few countries in the world that actually has this artificial debt ceiling. And on top of that, you have two countries that have the largest amount of US debt that they hold is China and Japan, which means that the interest that we're paying China and Japan, they're using that to take care of their people, and they're using that money coming into their government. And the wealthy people are looking at it saying, you know what, why don't I just buy up US debt and get the interest, and then I'll make money off of that. So what we're essentially allowing is rich people to make a profit rather than just saying, no, if you have money to buy US debt, then that means that you have money that we can tax you so that we are able to provide the essential services to make a country just function well and to have a well functioning society. And that's one of the reasons that I am a big advocate for the IRS to be fully funded, not because I believe the IRS should be targeting working class and low income people, but because I believe the IRS main focuses should be on corporations and wealthy people who have been known to not only hide their money, use illegal practices, and also use loopholes and do everything they can to not pay taxes. Even though if they actually just paid their fair share, then they would spend less money than they do on the political donations that it takes to get these lawmakers to write in loopholes for them. Another thing I also do want to talk about real quick is that how there's this thought process of people going around that if lawmakers in Congress were not able to get a paycheck when the government is shut down, that would make them think twice before going into a government shutdown. And I want to talk about why that necessarily isn't the case. And it's because the majority of lawmakers are millionaires. The majority of them do not care about their salary when it comes from Congress. They get money through mostly stock trading, also book deals, speaking engagement, events. They get a lot of money from other sources to where if you take away their pay from Congress, the majority of them probably wouldn't even notice it in their day-to-day lives. Now you do have some who do rely on that salary, but they are in the far minority when it comes to legislators. And it's nice to see corporations coming out and having these big like food donation giveaways, or we're giving away a free meal. And if you're a small business, that is wonderful that you're doing this. But to see these large chain corporation restaurants and these large businesses like Amazon or Target or Costco sit here and say, we're going to be giving away food and other necessities to people is almost a slap in the face when you consider that the reason these programs aren't fully funded and people are like in this situation where they have to receive government funding is one, they're not paying their fair share of taxes, but two is majority of these companies also do not pay living wages to all of their employees either. So they're bringing in, and companies have been bringing in record profit, but at the same time, we do not see record profit when it comes to their employees, or we're not seeing record profit when it comes to how much taxes these companies are paying. So please remember to, when it comes this election time coming up, when it comes to the election that's going to come up next year, remember to look at who your politicians are getting money from. Who are their donors? Are they mostly grassroots and small dollar donors, or are they mostly wealthy people and corporations? And that'll inform you who they're really serving and who, if push comes to shove, who they're going to side with. Is it going to be you, or is it going to be with the wealthy and ruling class? And also, with everything that is going on with this government shutdown and all the downstream effects, please remember to stay in community, share information and resources with your friends, your families, and your neighbors. If you do have the ability to donate and provide food or other aid to people, please do. And if you're not, please at least let people know where they can get food and different aid from as well. And stay safe out here. It is a difficult world in the United States, and it's a difficult time now. So please take care of yourself, and remember that we release new episodes every Wednesday each week. And I can't wait to be back here with you all again. Please be safe out here, and see you on the Left-Handed Leftist.